Welcome to This Explainer. We are diving right into a seriously fascinating historical stream today to answer a pretty fundamental question. Why are the Protestant, Catholic, and Ethiopian Bibles not exactly the same? Now, before we get into the weeds, what exactly is a canon? Well, think of it as a historical measuring stick. It's the finalized, official list of books that a specific community considers divinely authoritative. If you've ever opened these different texts side by side, you've definitely noticed the page counts and tables of contents vary wildly. So we're going to explore exactly how and why that happened and the rich history behind these ancient boundaries.
Here is our roadmap for today. 1. Debunking the banned books. 2. The Protestant 66 books. 3. The Catholic 73 books. 4. The Ethiopian 81 books. And finally, 5. A closer look at the Book of Enoch.
All right, Section 1, Debunking the Banned Books.
Okay, before we can really understand how these distinct canons formed, we have to clear away some modern misconceptions that totally clutter our view of history. You have probably seen claims online or maybe watched documentaries about mysterious hidden texts suppressed by some centralized authoritarian Western church. People absolutely love a good conspiracy. Just think of all those pop culture thrillers about secret vaults deep under Rome. And it naturally begs this exact question. Were their secret books actively banned and hidden away from the public to suppress the truth?
Well, the popular myth tells us there was this grand, centralized conspiracy of hidden truths. But the historical reality? It's far less scandalous and, honestly, much more fascinating. It was a process of gradual historical discernment. These extra books were never discovered in a desert cave and then suppressed by an evil empire. Not at all. They circulated openly. They were copied by scribes, heavily debated by early scholars, and simply accepted or rejected by different communities over centuries. There was no smoky back room where books were arbitrarily crossed off a list to hide doctrinal truths from the masses.
When we compare these traditions side by side, an amazing pattern emerges. Look at the New Testament. It's completely stable across the board. By the 2nd to 4th centuries, the 27-book New Testament was essentially fixed, and virtually every major global tradition totally agrees on it today. The real differences between these global traditions lie almost entirely in how they drew boundaries around the Old Testament. The numbers shift drastically from 66 to 73, all the way to 81 books, depending on who you ask, and it's entirely based on the ancient Jewish texts they decided to include or exclude. Let's unpack how each tradition made those specific decisions.
Moving on to Section 2, the Protestant 66 books.
The absolutely crucial point here is that Protestants didn't just invent a new Bible out of thin air during the 16th century Reformation. The 39 Protestant Old Testament books correspond perfectly to the Jewish Tanakh, that's the Law, the Prophets, and the Writings. By the time of Jesus, Palestinian Judaism already had a highly recognized core of sacred writings treated as the direct oracles of God. These were the very texts read in the synagogues and heavily quoted. So the Protestants simply selected the books with the broadest, most stable, and undisputed historical recognition as scripture by that early Jewish community, preserving a very tightly focused canon.
If we trace this historically, we see a pretty fascinating progression. Back in the 1st century, letters and narratives, like Paul's epistles and the Gospels, were circulating rapidly among widespread early churches. By the 2nd century, that core 27-book collection was widely acknowledged, despite some minority regional debates over specific books like Hebrews or James. Fast forward all the way to the 16th century, and Reformation theologians applied incredibly strict historical criteria. They chose to formally stick only to the undisputed texts, books with clear apostolicity, widespread early usage, and unquestionable doctrinal coherence. And that gives us the 66-book Protestant Bible we know today.
Section 3, the Catholic 73 books.
As the historical stream widens into the Catholic tradition, bringing the count up to 73 books, we encounter a vital term, deuterocanonical, which literally translates to second canon. These are crucial Jewish texts produced in the Second Temple period, mostly in the 2nd and 1st centuries BCE. Now, these books circulated widely in Greek and were incredibly valued by Greek-speaking Jews and early Christians. But they kind of sat right on the boundary line. They weren't generally treated by Palestinian Jews as equal in authority to the ancient law and the prophets, which naturally led to intense debates in the early church regarding their ultimate doctrinal authority. Even the ancient heavyweights wrestled with this canonical boundary. Take a famous historical anecdote involving the scholar Jerome. When Jerome translated the Bible into Latin to create the famous Vulgate in the late 4th century, he translated and included these texts, but with a major caveat. He explicitly distinguished them from the Hebrew canon.
He argued they should be read by the church for moral edification, not for establishing core doctrine. Now, under immense pressure from influential figures like Augustine, who really favored their inclusion, Jerome kept them in, but that clear distinction he made, it remained a heated topic of debate for centuries.
And that debate simmered for over a millennium. We start with the texts being written well before the time of Jesus. Then, regional synods like the Councils of Hippo and Carthage in the late 4th century actually treat them as full scripture. But because there was never an unbroken, unanimous view in the Latin West over the next 1,000 years, it actually wasn't until the Council of Trent in 1546 that these specific books were formally and dogmatically affirmed as inspired by the Catholic Church. This definitive decree was largely a clarifying, direct response to the Protestant rejection of these very same books just decades prior.
So what exactly are the books that caused centuries of theological debate? Well, they include fascinating texts like Tobit, Judith, the Wisdom of Solomon, and 1 and 2 Maccabees. These aren't just obscure footnotes, guys. They are historically massive for understanding the era between the Old and New Testaments. For instance, Maccabees provides the entire historical background for the Jewish festival of Hanukkah, detailing the Maccabean revolt against Greek oppression. They are incredibly useful for understanding early Jewish and Christian thought, even if different global traditions weigh their normative, doctrinal authority entirely differently today.
Let's look at Section 4, the Ethiopian 81 books.
We're going to shift our focus geographically now to East Africa. Geography often dictates history, and that is absolutely true here. Early Christianity reached the Aksumite kingdom, located in modern-day Ethiopia and Eritrea, very early on. Missionaries brought the Greek New Testament and the Greek translation of the Old Testament, the Septuagint, right into the region in the 4th century. Because these texts were immediately translated into the local language of Ge'ez, and because of their immense geographic isolation from the Roman Empire, Ethiopian Christians developed their canon entirely independent of the later Western and Byzantine debates.
Because of that independent development and intense geographic isolation, they preserved a breathtakingly rich tradition of books that practically vanished from use in the West. We're talking about massive, distinct editions. In the Old Testament, you have entire books like 1 Enoch and Jubilees. In the New Testament, you see texts like the Epistles of Clement and the Shepherd of Hermas. This beautifully expanded list brings their total to conventionally 81 books. From a Protestant or even Catholic standpoint, many of these are viewed as apocryphal or pseudo-epigraphal, but to the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, they are active, deeply revered, inspired scripture.
And finally, Section 5, the Book of Enoch.
To really understand why these boundaries matter, let's dive into a specific case study, the famous Book of Enoch. When we say Book of Enoch, we are usually referring to 1 Enoch. It's a composite Jewish apocalyptic work written between the 3rd and 1st centuries BCE. And let me tell you, it is packed with intense, almost cinematic imagery. It wildly expands on a brief Genesis narrative to talk about rebellious angels, known as the Watchers, who come down from heaven to corrupt humanity and teach forbidden knowledge. It features a dramatic apocalyptic judgment by a chosen messianic figure called the Son of Man, and it details massive cosmic visions and astronomical calendars. It is a text that deeply influenced later Jewish and Christian apocalyptic thought.
But look at how drastically differently this incredible text is treated today. Western traditions, both Protestant and Catholic, view 1 Enoch as a fascinating, edifying piece of historical, extra-biblical literature, but decidedly non-canonical. It's basically something scholars read to understand the ancient mindset. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church, however, stands utterly unique in the world here. They never lost it. They kept 1 Enoch in active liturgical use, continuously copied it in the Ge'ez language, and integrated it fully as inspired foundational scripture within their 81-book Bible. Now you might be wondering, if this book was so influential that early groups loved it, why isn't it in everyone's Bible? Well, it is true that the New Testament book of Jude actually echoes 1 Enoch directly. But here is the crucial point regarding canonical boundaries. Early Christian writers quoting a text didn't automatically grant that entire book canonical status for the wider church. Just as the Apostle Paul could quote a Greek pagan poet to make a cultural point without making that poet's work divinely inspired, Jude quoting Enoch showed it was a widely recognized cultural text, but it wasn't considered normative for core doctrine in the eyes of the broader Western church.
The Bible wasn't just dropped from the sky as a single uniform table of contents. It is the result of historical judgments, community boundaries, and centuries of careful discernment. The Protestant, Catholic, and Ethiopian Bibles differ simply because each tradition drew its boundary at a different point in the exact same historical stream. Which leaves us with a pretty profound question to think about. If the historical stream had shifted just slightly in your region of the world centuries ago, what would the Bible you read today look like? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this helped clear up the fascinating history behind the pages.